Pressure mounting on the Prime Minister to finally compensate all those people wrongly accused, all those postmasters, as hundreds of them still wait a settlement, they still wait justice, whatever form that will take. And then there's those smiling bosses who ran the post office at the time.
Well, overnight, more than 1 million people have now signed an online petition calling for Paula Vanells, who led the post office when submasters were unfairly prosecuted, to be stripped of her honour. So far, only a fraction of those convicted have been cleared, but ministers are set to meet today. The idea is to consider measures to exonerate all those involved in what's been called the biggest miscarriage of justice in recent British history. Well, let's bring in our digital political editor, Millie Cooke, to talk about this morning. Good morning to you, Millie. Look, it's all very well, the Prime Minister calling this a huge miscarriage of justice, but what is being done about it?
Good morning. Yes, so ministers will meet today to discuss measures to really bring justice for the victims of this scandal. Between 1999 and 2015, more than 700 people were convicted of crimes, and just 93 people have been pardoned. So today, Kevin Hollinrake will meet with Justice Secretary Alex Chalk. At the moment, ministers, Rishi Sunak confirmed yesterday, they're looking at exonerating every single victim of this scandal. They're also looking at stripping the post office of its role in the appeals process, because since the first victims of the scandal were convicted, the post office has been managing the entire process. So they're looking at moving that instead towards the Crown Prosecution Service. So ministers, the meeting's been brought forward by a week, so it really demonstrates the urgency of this problem. But they will meet today to discuss the proposals. So far, the government's handed out around £125 million worth of compensation to the victims, but obviously only 93 people have really received some form of justice in what Rishi Sunak admitted was the biggest miscarriage of justice in recent times.
What's he going to do about it? That's the whole question. What can he possibly do about it? You know, Millie, I find it sad to think that we're only really talking about this because of an ITV drama, and suddenly it brings it all home to everyone. And also, I would say this to the viewers and listeners, this is the first instance, big instance, of AI gone wrong. That we're supposed to trust artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence knows better than us, except that it doesn't. And we do all this talking, Millie, about who's to blame. Is it the post office? Is it the government? Who? But Fujitsu, I think it's Fujitsu who were behind it, were they? You know, we need to hear more about whoever developed the actual programme and what they're going to do in terms of compensation.
Yeah, there very much have been calls for Fujitsu to take over paying out the compensation, because obviously it's a huge amount of money that's being put pressure on the post office for them to pay. But Fujitsu is worth more than £50 billion. It's a multinational organisation. It's got more than 7,000 employees in the UK. So it is currently under a lot of pressure to pay out on these kind of postmasters who are struggling, and a lot of them as well have been financially ruined because they've been forced to pay out of their own pocket for the allegedly siphoned off money that they were alleged to have taken from the post offices, wrongly so.
Can I ask you about the role of the Lib Dem leader in all of this, Sir Ed Davey? We talk about the pressure growing on Fujitsu under Horizon and the pressure on the Prime Minister, but what about Ed Davey? Is he culpable in some way?
I mean, he's certainly taking a lot of heat at the moment. There have been calls for his job in recent days. Ed Davey obviously served as Minister for the Post Office between 2010 and 2012. And there have been suggestions that he sort of fobbed off victims of the scandal. He was repeatedly warned about issues in the technology, the accounting system that caused so many people to be wrongly convicted of siphoning off money from the post office. Ed Davey says he's deeply sorry for what happened. He also says that he was deeply misled by the post office. So he's been very much distancing himself from the scandal and suggesting that he sort of did nothing wrong, he was misinformed. But no, absolutely, there's a lot of pressure on Ed Davey to come forward and really explain exactly what he did and didn't know as so many people were being convicted.
Thank you very much indeed. This is the whole thing. I mean, if the post office are saying, well, the system says this. If the people who supplied Fujitsu, the whole programme, they say this is the way it works, the way it's supposed to be. People just believe whether you're a judge in court, you're told this system works. Why shouldn't you believe what is coming from this? And I go back to this whole point about artificial intelligence and the reassurances we're given, it's all going to be fine. It's all going to be fantastic. Well, it hasn't been in this situation. What form does compensation take for the people who have taken their own lives, whose lives have been ruined, people who have died before the compensation has come through, if anything? And there's so many people who aren't even applying for compensation.
Yeah, and I think this ITV documentary has even dredged it up so that more people have come forward, because this was the big thing in this story. A lot of people were so mortified and ashamed, even though they were innocent. They weren't talking to other postmasters about this who were feeling exactly the same. And it's only as time has passed that they have created this kind of cohort and realised, joined the dots, that there was this widespread disaster going on.
And a lot of them paid their own money in to try and balance the books, which makes everything look really ghastly.
Pressure on them, their relationships, their families, their reputation in the community, their finances, their well-being, just devastating. We will be speaking to somebody who was personally affected in all this a little bit later on in the programme as well.
Here's another thing about this. I mean, we're talking about we can't get people to join the armed forces. We've got 3 boats in the Navy. We haven't got enough crew to staff them. Who would be... And we've got massive deficits within the police services around the country as well, even though the Home Office will say figures are at their highest ever. Panorama tonight on BBC One will show you that there's 18,000 of a deficit in the police force around the country. But who would become a postmaster or postmistress now? That's the whole thing. How are we going? I mean, I know they want rid of post offices and whatever.
Well, I think this whole scandal could actually be the end of the post office.
Could
because
be.
The cost of the compensation alone will be devastating for whoever has to end up paying.
But then that plays into the privatisation hands, which a lot of people have wanted all along.
No, it's really sad on so many levels. Let us know your thoughts on this morning, especially if you were affected or you know somebody who was affected.
Would you be a postmaster or mistress?
It's not an easy job either to do. Apparently quite a lot of tests and interviews and so forth in order to be able to get the job in the first place. Oh, so much to say on this. Let us know your thoughts. GBViews@gbnews.com.